Throughout Dr. Coleman's 13 years of experience, the spirit of discovery was in how she could connect the dots to deliver what the patients needed, keeping compassion at the forefront. It has been a heartfelt mission and still is for Dr. Amy Coleman. As a family medical physician with secondary training in Japanese acupuncture, Dr. Coleman started as a flight surgeon in the U.S. Air Force. Through wartime medicine, she learned what it meant to be fully integrated as a unit of a team with her patients. Dr. Coleman also established new creative models of patient care design for the Air Force still employed today. In her work as the youngest and first female commander of the Special Operations Clinic at Ramstein, Germany, she guided global medical missions and was appointed physician for officers of the highest command positions. Throughout her career, she was chosen as primary physician for F-16 fighter squadrons, the United States Air Force Special Forces, and U.S. embassies, as well as serving as the medical coordinator and physician for the NASA Space Shuttle missions. Hard to believe at 25 years old you've done all that. She is also the author of Discovering the Doctor Within, which is available on Amazon. So we welcome to Quinnipiac University, Dr. Amy Coleman.
Thank you, Don. And thank you, Quinnipiac University and their School of Medicine. This has been the most awesome Veterans Day celebration that I've been a part of. And I hope that it's just the beginning of a tradition for myself in living this kind of beauty on this day. And thank you for showing me the template of what that looks like. So, without further ado, making a difference from wherever you are. So this is me 2 years into my flight surgery assignment at Lackland Air Force Base, in the backseat of an F-16, which cruises at about 550 miles per hour, and it's at a Kelly Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. This is where Guard pilots teach young pilots to certify on this airframe. So we have a lot of back seats back there to be able to let the students ride along. So when the students aren't in the back seat, I'm in the back seat. And so it was fun. I was able to log 40 hours in F-16, which doesn't sound like much, but for every flight you go on, it's just an hour. It's called a sortie, there and back. And since jet fuel is so expensive, it's maybe 30 minutes to an hour for each ride. So over the course of a couple of years, I was able to engage with them in their training, not just fan rides, but real air-to-air combat training missions and air-to-ground, known as dogfighting and strafe attacks, which are dramatic and exciting. So, first of all, this is going to start with a history lesson, not just with myself, but with the Air Force. Okay, so I always wanted to be a vet, and as you can see from my Dorothy Hamill haircut, my mom really liked ice skating, and every little girl at the time, I think, reflected her hairstyle. So, the one thing about animals, though, as much as we love them and have tender hearts for them, is they don't have much of a free will. Their free will is our free will, which means the decisions we make for them. And I didn't go into veterinary medicine because of that. I wanted to see how we can affect the free will of people so that then we can affect the free will of their health as well as communities and the animals that they own. So I felt like there was a little more influence in becoming a vet. So I am a vet, and I'm glad to say I'm a vet, but a different kind of vet. All right. So I believe there's something to be said for speaking this lecture topic about making a difference wherever you are. Because if I can do it as what we call a general medical officer flight surgeon, then you can do it from anywhere you are. Because a general medical officer flight surgeon is pretty much lowest on the totem pole. It means you don't have a board certification. It means you're just out of internship. So if I can do this, you can do this, which means making a difference from wherever you are. Aerospace medicine. This is the study of normal physiology in challenging environments. What you see a picture of here is in Balad Air Force Base when we were deployed. We had to deal with our normal physiology in very abnormal environments of threat, places where you didn't know where your safety lay. So this was one of my favorite pictures because it sums up that that's an outhouse and those are sandbags. So as flight surgeons, we always strove to make sure that our patients were safe no matter what they were doing, no matter where they were. And this is just the most primitive idea of that here. Okay. Now, Flight Medicine 101 or Flight Surgery 101 is not what you think. I've had people come up and say, you must have very steady hands when you fly at such high altitude and are still able to perform operations. It's not that. Actually, surgeon is an old English word for physician. And flight, well, it's about taking care of people that have to do with alternative realities which exist in the military, which are aerospace related. Puts a lot of pressure on your natural physiology. Now, flight surgery itself, we're going to go into a little bit of history of that now that you've seen some history of myself. It's existed since 1914, and there have been a lot of renegades. Now, renegades through medicine have always pushed the frontiers and the boundaries of what was possible, and often they did it by breaking the rules. So, I'm not advocating for breaking the rules, but I'm advocating for you to look within the rule book and make sure it makes sense to you first, because pioneering medicine has taken all different forms. And with this gentleman, Dr. Werner Forssmann, he actually lost his job as a result of what he did to allow us to have cardiac catheterization. Now, cardiac catheterization is commonplace these days. They run a catheter up in your femoral, goes into your heart, and it looks at your cardiac vessels to make sure they're open. I'm sure you have grandmothers, grandfathers that have had stents placed or open heart surgeries because they've had a blockage, and they found the blockage through cardiac catheterization. It took a very brave Army Brigade surgeon who originally was a cardiologist named Werner Forssmann, who used himself as the first patient. He numbed his antecubital fossa. He put a catheter into his vein. He walked with that catheter in his heart 2 stories down into the X-ray floor to see it under fluoroscopy and take a picture. And then he showed the picture to his staff and his department chairs, who immediately thought that this was too renegade, and he lost his job. So his paper that he wrote on this was shelved. This was in 1929 that he performed the procedure on himself. So he ended up being a brigade surgeon in World War II. He served as a Nazi. And from there, at 1956, long after he had been a POW and released and then become a primary care doctor and then a urologist and then served in the Black Forest of Germany, they looked him up and they tried to get a hold of him because they said, we found your paper from 1929 and we think it's now a good idea. So he and his fellow researchers that rediscovered him were given the Nobel Peace Prize in 1956. So just goes to show you that sometimes it takes some time for people to realize the forward-thinking nature of medicine. So flight surgeons are human factors experts. This means we are always attentive. We have something in military called situational awareness, which is a form of being on focus of what's going on with your folks. A true focus that is always taking into account where they are, how they're doing, are they off of baseline, because you know them. Your patients are your team. Unlike patients that come and go with weekly appointments, in the military, a lot of times you'll see them every day, and they're your friends, and they're your colleagues. And if they're not well, then that affects your wellness. Because what if you're flying in the back seat with them, or what if you're deployed with one of them? And the health of your own body is really reliant upon the health of his or hers, because you're so much a part of the same group, organization, and mission. So this is another example of how human factors experts and flight surgeons test on themselves. This here is a picture of Captain Strap, who still to this day is the fastest human being on Earth. So he strapped himself to a rocket. He was a flight surgeon. And so he accomplished the mission of reaching 626 miles an hour in less than 2 seconds, which basically put a strain on his body of 40 Gs. Now, a G is a weight force. 1 G is how much you weigh right here in this atmospheric space and pressure. So at 1 G, you weigh what you weigh on a scale. But at 40 Gs, he weighs 3 tons. So under that kind of physiologic stress, you can imagine that when people are doing the things that the Air Force requires and NASA requires, that you're going to feel it. And this is where flight surgeons come in, because we have to feel it to know what it feels like. So that's why when people ask, well, why are you always leaving the clinic to fly? It's because I need to know what it feels like, plus it's fun. So that is just one example of the history. Excuse me. Is it better off or on the microphone? Can you hear me like this okay? If I were to walk? Okay. So these are some of the things that flight surgery has done for humanity. This is a flight surgeon in Vietnam who's administering the needs of a small village, basically giving vaccinations in a deployed setting in underserved countries. Oftentimes, they're essential to the public health of a facility. We might have a relationship with a country that needs some intervention in healthcare. So this is something that we do readily and is a privilege. Here we have a flight surgeon from the Vietnam days, and he's getting ready to go into he's preparing a force penetrator, which is what he's going to ride down to do a rescue mission. And so there's air medical staff there in the helicopter and a pararescue jumper. And pararescue jumpers are also advocates for rescue in the military. They're the Air Force equivalent to Navy SEALs or Army Rangers. So the difference in pararescue jumpers and why they work so hand-to-hand with flight surgeons is because they're also paramedic trained. So they're the medical aspect of the Special Forces as well. So this is a Vietnam-era flight surgeon. He's preparing for a combat mission. He's also cross-trained as a navigator. In the Air Force, there's also a pilot-physician program where you can be both a pilot and a physician. And these are great opportunities for physicians to have their foot in each world. So many opportunities, but I'm not here for recruitment purposes. Just a little step into the history. So when NASA came online, as a civilian a company now, they contract a lot of services through the military. And as they were performing tests in spacesuits, you can better believe there were flight surgeons there to help them make sure that was going along proficiently. Now, this is a flight surgeon and his medic staff loading a casualty. This is oftentimes one of the biggest things that flight surgeons do are first responders. So you can think of them as aeromedical doctors that go and and fly with the patient in the airframes to get them to hospitals to seek higher echelon care. Okay. So this physician, this is at the School of Aerospace Medicine. He was demonstrating what I call a G suit. So in areas of high Gs, which is when you're flying and you're feeling that heaviness of all the extra gravity weight on you, you'll have these little devices. You see how it looks like he's got almost like chaps on from the ankles up? So when you're under more than 4 Gs, those will start to squeeze. And as they squeeze, it keeps your blood volume where it needs to be rather than pooling in your feet, which will cause you to lose consciousness. There's also something you can do, which is a breathing technique that we teach to keep your intrathoracic pressure up so that you don't lose blood to your core as well or to your feet. And that keeps you conscious while you're flying. So these are all good things to know, especially when you're teaching your pilots and other flight surgeons. Okay, loading into an ambulance. Now, one of the highlights of being a flight surgeon is aerovac medicine, and we're masters at it. As a matter of fact, other countries are always looking to us as to how we do it so quickly. We can move someone from intraoperative theaters that are like Balad or Baghdad all the way to the highest echelon care at Andrews Air Force Base within 36 hours. And that's phenomenal because they usually have to make a couple stops, one at Landstuhl, Germany. And do you see how the litters of the patients are 4 rungs high? So we can load them like that into the cargo bays of C-130s, and the patients have assistance of nurses alongside them throughout the whole flight. Okay. So making a difference from where you are, because this is actually more about you than it is about me, and it's more about you than it is about the Air Force or being a flight surgeon. And this is where it starts to apply to you. So just listening carefully here is very important, because practicing empathy is where that starts. Practicing empathy is when you take that focus, which is a gift, a focus that you can tune out the world and your own thoughts and entrain into the person in front of you. Now, there's a wise Sufi master poet named Rumi. Did anybody know Rumi? Okay. Well, Rumi would say that the person across from you actually can be like a textbook that you can learn from. That if you pay close enough attention, that there's so much that that person can teach you. And when people say, my patients teach me lessons, or I learn so much from my patients, they mean that in the deepest way. Because the reflections of the person in front of you, when you take it fully into yourself from a place of focus, you'll be able to bring up solution sets for them that they haven't seen before. Actually giving them the space to talk opens up all new paradigms of them being able to find their wise person inside. So many people feel ignored, lonely, outcast, and without time for anybody. Nobody gives them time. So if you create that model within your patient flow, what you'll find is amazing. Empathy is where it starts. Now this might have just sounded woo-woo, but I'm going to tell you it's a new science. It's called spooky action at a distance. And this is by Einstein. He said that you actually don't have to be physically touched. The concept that an object can be moved or changed without any kind of mechanical contact with another object. And this happens actually at the subatomic level. So that's the smallest part of ourselves. So if it happens at the smallest part of ourselves, it happens at the largest part of ourselves. And I'll tell you what that looks like. Here's a picture of it. We're just going to take a photon, one of the smallest pieces of an atomic particle. If you actually put 2 photons together in a vicinity that they can kind of call paired, they actually will do something that you probably are familiar with. It's like a Bluetooth. Do you use Bluetooth on your phone? Okay, it's the same kind of pairing. Now, that connection doesn't require a cord or a touch, correct? Well, it happens that way in atomic particles just as it happens in the larger part of ourselves when we're in an empathic connection with others. Now, at a photon level, that means that non-differentiated photons will actually form a polarity between each other. One will be a 0 or a 1, or one will be a positive or a negative. And that's how they stay. They harmonize in that way to balance each other out. Now, if you were to separate the photons to other sides of the world, those two, and you were to change the polarity of one in Hong Kong, the one that's here in Connecticut will shift and adjust without any time elapsed to maintain the polarity and the connection. So that's called spooky action at a distance, or pairing, or human Bluetoothing, okay? And this is why empathy is so important, because we're meant to be in those realms. We're meant to be in those realms. The other way that empathy, this is the macrocosm, or the larger scale of the Bluetoothing. So if it happens in a microscopic photon atomic particle way of empathy, called spooky action at a distance, then let's take it up a notch to the system level. The system level of the heart. What would that look like? And it looks like this. It's a whole new vital sign called heart rate variability. This is Bluetoothing of the heart. Now, the heart is a lot of photons. That's a lot of atomic particles. But what happens when people are in vicinity of each other, thinking empathic thoughts or good, compassionate thoughts, is that the heart starts to pair with the other's heart. It actually starts to harmonize and fall into step. And what that does to your own body is remarkable, because it shows that you're accepting and harmonizing. What that's shown in history of science now, that's just opening the pages of this new science, is that resilience plays a part in heart rate variability, or the coherence with another heart. Also, the idea of your immune system works better in these realms. You also have decreased depression and decreased anxiety. This is shown in patients that have just gotten over a heart attack. If they have a low heart rate variability, they have an increased risk for anxiety and depression, and they show low heart rate variability. Now, you might say, well, what is heart rate variability? I understand that it shifts into the person's heart rate that's in front of them, or that they're having a relationship with. But what is it? Well, your heart rate is not a metronome. A metronome is a mechanical beat that never changes. So if your heart rate is the same over time, that's unhealthy. That's like one note being played, which is not music. One note being played over and over is an alarm, if you think about it. Many notes being played in harmony is music. So in heart rate variability, therein we have the music of the heart, because we're pairing with another heart in empathic design, which is a part of physics called quantum entanglement, or spooky action at a distance. Does that make sense? Now it's not woo-woo anymore. Okay, so this is just a part of the story, and this is why it's so exciting to be in preventative medicine right now. Okay, so we're going to go through a little more history, because we talked about the first part of your making a difference in the world is empathy. Okay, now we're going to give you some insight just into your next step of what's going to make a difference in the world. First of all, a few pictures. Now, I had a colonel. He He was trained as a pediatrician. He was my preceptor or my professor in aerospace medicine. So he went on after being a pediatrician, being a chaplain in the Air Force, and then an aerospace medicine specialist who became the head of the Aerospace Medical School. His name was Colonel Hadley Reed, and he was a character. So what you're going to see at the bottom of these pictures are some captions, and the captions are his wisdoms. We call them Reedisms. His character put a caption below every picture. So I held on to those because they were so insightful. This is one of the Colonel Reedisms. Your defining tests are not on a sheet of paper. All right? So this is just a repelling, but paying homage to Colonel Reed and his great quotes. As a flight surgeon, you're going to learn to, first of all, you finish medical school, you finish internship. You got to go through what the pilots and the air crew go through to know what they're up to, and so that you'll be safe as well in doing similar operations. So we don't jump out of aircraft, unfortunately. I wish we would have, but we do some PLF training, which is parachute landing falls. But then we also do ejection seat training. This is me strapping in, getting ready to go for a ride up this ladder. And so it simulates the F-16 ejection system, which basically clears you if there was ever a need to remove your canopy and egress. Okay, that's how fast I was going. You can't really tell. But yeah, this is it in action. So centrifuge was always fun. Colonel Reed always said, life ain't linear. Life ain't linear, okay? This whole idea of me doing what I've done has been because I've gotten off the path. That is the regular path of academic medicine. So never be scared to go to places where you're having experiences that are outside the box, so to speak. So life ain't linear. The centrifuge brings you into the awareness of what 9Gs feels like, which is the operational Gs when you're doing the air-to-air combat training. All right, after that kind of go at the centrifuge, you do develop some ecchymotic lesions, capillary dilatation. These are called Geasels. They're similar to measles, but they're Geasels because they're caused by G's. Okay, so we're all showing off our Geasels, which go away in time. Really no immunizations needed for that. But as Colonel Reed would say when we'd go up, with a pouty lip, he'd say, my sympathy titers are darn near non-detectable. So he would let us know, toughen up. And so altitude chamber training, this is testing your wherewithal when you're without oxygen. You really see another side of your friends during this time. The guys that you wonder if they're drunk, if they're going to be happy drunks, or the drunks that you think are going to be mean drunks. It applies to people without oxygen as well. They do put you in a safe environment where you're watched and monitored, and then the oxygen is bled off in the system, and you're asked to do math problems and have deep conversations, and they record these. And it becomes a source of fun for all. So very quickly you determine that you're not able to logistically apply mathematics or logical thinking, and not to trust your brain. Because your brain tells you everything's fine, and many people become very stubborn that they are just more than fine and can do their job perfectly. That's where the Air Force wants to show you that sometimes your mind can lead you wrong. And this is very important to know. Or your brain can lead you wrong. You don't live on planet Fair, Colonel Reed would say, when we would wonder why we had to put ourselves through this. Combat Casualty Care course, this is where we learn to put it together hospitals on the fly, and then also dress in this fine couture. I think this is one of a kind, not. So this is to keep yourself away from biohazard warfare, safe from and at a distance from anything that could hurt you. but it is 130 degrees inside that suit, so you don't want to have to be there for long. Wartime is not by design cooperative, is what he'd say if you were uncomfortable in that gear. All right, we took some T38 flights, which are the acrobatic small versions of planes. And we just were under the understanding that we're not pilots, of course. If we ever had to land and take off in a plane, it would be a bad day for everyone. But we knew medicine, and we knew that we had a choice. We could provide lift or drag, which means we can add to a problem or we can find a solution. So it's, and like Colonel Reed would say, it's binary. Are you going to provide lift or drag? And T-38 flights were fun because you're doing rolls and having a great time. And so Colonel Reed's quote to that was, flight surgeons are unsufferably happy. And we are, because we're in so many diverse elements. But we also have to run clinics, so don't think there's not paperwork and all kinds of drudgery. So mishap investigation training was when anytime a air crew would go down, there would be 30 days of an investigative report as to why that happened. And we were trying to get to the root, not to tell one person that they were the core of what went wrong and that they needed to be fired, because that wasn't what happened usually. What happened usually was we found what they call a Swiss cheese effect, which was the system denigrated and degraded over time in safety, and that certain holes by each person were found, which led to a major hole which allowed the mishap to happen. So there was not blame. There were just systems that failed from people that were overworked, undertrained, or faced with too many hats at one time. And so this is how the Air Force prevented accidents, and I would say hospitals would need to do the same in a perfect world. The map is not the land, meaning that just because something looks the way it is, doesn't mean you have the answers until you do full investigation. Survival, escape, and resistance school is when you you're put in a situation behind enemy lines. You're simulated as in a POW scenario. You have to learn to live off the land. This is me on the left eating a caterpillar, I believe. You have to learn which bugs to eat and which not. And toasted grasshopper with a match underneath it tastes a little bit like toasted corn. Earthworms are horrible. There's too much dirt in the GI tract, so I don't recommend them. But then you can catch fish that you can't even see mine, he's so small. And then on the right is a rabbit that we were able to catch and skin, and that becomes your meal. By the way, they're also training military tracking dogs while you're navigating to safe lines. You're through the woods, so you're trying to survive in these elements. Feed yourself. Stay out of the scope and the smell and the scent of the dogs that are being trained to track you, and coming across people that are playing the part of helpful civilians, and people that play the part of POW camps in which you become a part of. So you have the full kind of experience there, the whole reality show of it. So this is the graduating class at the Aerospace School of Medicine. Fundamental reoccurring motive is mutual support. It is countercultural to the way we were trained, and that is true. Never learned teamwork in medical school. That's sad, because going into some training that's so difficult, where you are isolated, only continues in your career if you don't intercept that with another learning. So the training and the integrating of yourself with the unit of a team is important. We need to develop this in medical school, whether that be with ropes courses, leadership courses, activities that get them physical, and interacting and trusting one another. So here's your homework number 2. Making a difference from wherever you are, because the key to showing you all those pictures those were the dramatic displays of how we develop teamwork, but you don't have to go through all of that. You don't have to hang upside down. You don't have to strap yourself to a rocket. You don't have to do all of these pictures of these cool, fun, entertaining things to develop the lessons learned. You can do that from the comfort of your own chair. As long as you pay heed to what these steps are and integrate them in your life. Stepping out of your comfort zone is what those pictures were about. So you don't have to do all of the dramatic flares there. You can step out in your comfort zone using your full intellect, because it's going to take it. It's going to take you plugging into other parts of yourself to step out from your comfort zone. When you're in your comfort zone, your mind rules the show, your brain. As a matter of fact, for most of us, our body is just a transport mechanism for our brain. We live in our thoughts. We're happy there, and that's how we go about it. We're intellectuals, and we give a lot of credit to that and a lot of authority to that. However, I'll tell you, there are more intelligences than just your brain. Do you know how they say you're only using 10% of your mind or your brain? They say you only use, 10%? Is that what they say? Okay. We found the other 90%. But it's not from the neck up. Your other key core intelligences or intellect are in other parts of your body. The nerve plexus centers that run the heart are 60 times stronger oscillators of electromagnetic frequency energy than your brain ever wanted to be. It's also the first organ that develops in your fetal development so far as to that capacity of energetic projection. So the idea that your brain is all within your noggin or within your head, we don't say head in the military because that means bathroom. So but while we say that your brain or what's in your noggin is the full intelligence of you, is a fallacy. It's wrong. Your intellect is in other parts of your body, beginning with your heart, and then also your gut instinct. These are intellects. You learn that in acupuncture. I was lucky enough to study at Harvard. They have a structural acupuncture course for physicians. It's 9 months long. They have the Japanese translator of the text come over and teach the wisdom of acupuncture. Between each lecture, they have the lab researcher come in and explain anatomically how it works. And in that, we found that centers of the body where there's the largest nerve plexus, if you can think of nerve plexus as being a form of a brain, which in the primitive creatures it is, and your brain is a large plexus, wouldn't you think that sometimes you can have non-local nerve plexus, which will be intellect? Okay, so let's look at that. When we're in alignment with our heart, the heart actually works in conjunction with the mind to balance the centers, parasympathetic and sympathetic. Is everybody familiar with fight or flight response, which in medicine we call the sympathetic nervous system? Okay. So if you are in a fight or flight mode and your heart is racing and your body is producing all the chemicals, that the same ones we use to start a person's heart when they're dying on an ER bed, epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline. These are all body's responses to stress, okay? So that's the sympathetic response. The parasympathetic response is your body at ease. It's called the rest and digest mode. So the rest and digest mode is where we do our best thinking. It also is where the heart finds its highest intellect as well. That's where the state of intuition comes in. In the brain, when you're at rest, the state of creativity comes in. In the gut, when you're at rest, the state of digestion comes in. So it's being at homeostasis and resilience and response to environment that all these intellects work together. The gut actually acts in the moment to protect you at all times. This is something I learned very quickly in the military, because with pilots, you can sense them kind of looking you up and down and using their emotional awareness to wonder, are you here to help us? Or are you here to drag us down? Are you here to take us off of our flight duties? Or are you here to help us stay on our flight duties? Are you a doc that just seeks the power to take us off of our role in flying and providing our mission for the Air Force? Are you truly going to help us in our careers? And they'll make a gut decision on it, whether or not they trust you. And a lot of that doesn't come from a biological, logical, concrete state of thinking. That comes from a gut reflex. Now, you may say, the gut, that's just digestion. Well, you know, we're coming to see that the gut is a lot more than just our digestion. It's got a mind of its own. Not only does the heart have a mind of its own, but the gut has a mind of its own. You don't realize, but you're populated with so many microbes that have been there for eons, knowing you, understanding you, in ways that you've had no clue. They know what's friend or foe down there. They send your body signals, as a matter of fact. The idea of the microbiome, or the garden in your gut, is becoming a brand new science in medicine. Do you know that even these microbiomes have their own neurotransmitters in their mini brains? So when they're happy, that actually is funneled and communicated with your own brain. So the new areas of science now are showing that neurotransmitters that are created by these little bug guts, or gut bugs, create neurotransmitter changes in your own brain, which elicit happiness, even courage. There's a study out of Duke which showed that when the flora from the gut biome of a mouse who was courageous was replaced with the gut biome flora of a mouse that was very frightened, that they took on separate characters. In other words, the analysis of what's going on with our microbiomes or our gut flora for things we haven't even considered before are full frontal in medicine right now. We're looking at this. So, is anybody on a prebiotic here? Probiotic? Okay, are you on probiotics? Okay, what about prebiotics? Prebiotic? Excellent. So probiotic is supplementing your gut flora, right? Everybody's heard about that? Prebiotics are steroids for your probiotics. Okay? So the interesting thing is, I'm from a country town, Wilmington, North Carolina, where everybody used to take apple cider vinegar. Has anybody ever heard of that as a possible cure? Has anybody poo-pooed it and said, that's, we're talking about the gut and the colon, so, pardon the reference, but has anybody thought, that's silliness? What a bunch of country farmers, where did they get that idea? The interesting thing is, guys, that apple cider vinegar has now been known to be a prebiotic or a steroid or a multivitamin for your probiotic gut flora. So it does make sense. So things that we have swept under the rug in preventative medicine for a very long time are now finding all new inroads of why they make sense. We just haven't been looking in the right places. Okay? So this is the next part of this. We talk about our intellect as a multiverse instead of a universe. In other words, it's not just in our brain, it's in our whole selves. So think of the intellect as a multiverse instead of a universe. This is part of your multiverse, the intuitive mind where genius resides. So when your mind is still and at ease, this is where Einstein said he had his best ideas. This is where he came up with the theorems. This is where, when Newton sat under an apple tree with his mind clear, he developed the theory of gravity. So if we got out of our own ways and got out of the traffic of the thoughts that we constantly think, that keep us awake at night, that don't solve problems, but are just constant replays of the same stories, if we were to be able to put that at rest, what could we actually give to the world? So this is Einstein saying the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. That's Albert Einstein. Think about disciplined interiority. A lot of times when we're in those constant states of struggle and battle with our thoughts, we're in inferiority, and it's non-disciplined. When we discipline our thoughts inside, think of Walden Pond, think of getting out in nature, think of diffusing those constant mindlessnesses. When you create a space between the draining programs that you think, you engage all other levels of intelligence. The way we think, it's like running a GPS and a Google search at all times. It drains your battery. So disengaging from those in silence and spaciousness creates all kinds of inroads for thoughts that you have wondered where they've been for so long. New introspective designs, perspectives, intuitions. And because you're living outside of your comfort zone and plugging into all of your intellect, you have the courage from your heart to listen to those. And you have the gut instinct to guide you on if they're right or not. So your full intellect is by design helping you in your mindfulness practice. Who has a mindfulness practice as far as meditation, getting out in nature, just kind of turning off the jets so that they can sleep at night? Does anyone have an activity as far as that? Duke University is now teaching their medical students a mindfulness program. It helps with studies, it helps with relaxation, it helps prevent anxiety and depression. We're studying at the University of Louisville from their program and making great inroads into people, into the medical students having more resilience. Okay, so making a belief from wherever you are, making a difference from wherever you are, is creating a belief system that you have a purpose in life. This is huge because, believe it or not, the thoughts that you think on a regular basis actually become constructs that are reflected in your physiology. In other words, genes turn off and on depending on the thoughts you think on a regular basis. So this is something that we need to realize. We've gathered thoughts to us. You know, in the beginning of the day, you might have one thought, but if you adhere too closely to it, other thoughts like it will join. By the end of the day, you'll have a whole avalanche of thoughts from that one thought in the beginning of the day. So that like attracts like. So just be disciplined in your interiority of your thinking. Believe it or not, Abraham Lincoln said it right when he said, every man over 40 is responsible for his face. What he meant by that is that every line that you carve onto that atmosphere and that landscape has been by your design. What you've thought, what emotions you've had, what you've held over time, and that becomes your character. So that is something that you really need to be aware of and make a choice, because it's all a choice. Remember, we started about free will. It's about a choice we make. You're not an animal that doesn't have free choice. You're a human who can find your way. So social epigenetics shows that the thoughts you think actually turn on genes that can disrupt your immune system and can also create altered function in inflammation. They did a study at Duke University and also led by Professor Stephen Cole out of UCLA on social epigenetics. 254 child Nepalese soldiers were studied. And what happened was they had been at war, the People's War in Nepal, for 5 years. And these child Nepalese soldiers took a resilience test. And many of them actually showed some signs of PTSD. However, when they brought the results back and tested it with the genomes of each patient, they found that those that had an attitude, a true belief that they could make a difference, that they could come out of this okay, that they had a say in how things were going to turn out, and that they believed things were going to be okay. They had a repression of the gene system, which in the PTSD patients showed a great expanse of expression, and that was detrimental to the immune system and increased inflammation in those PTSD patients with forlorn thoughts of being a victim. So you are mapping at any one time the biology of your physical nature by the thoughts that you manage and that you carry with you. So just be aware that this is a brand new field of science. That's why preventative medicine is going into areas that we've never seen before. This is an example, a real-life example of the anatomy of a self-transcendent belief system in action. When I was deployed to Balad Air Force Base, this is a triple amputee, Brian Colfage. He was an airman on his way across base, his second time in Balad, and he was a security forces airman who was just on his way to get some water from the water cooler when a 110 millimeter rocket landed at his feet. It was so hot it blew off both of his legs and actually liquefied them. One of his arms was blown off, and the other arm, his hand, dangled by the wrist by a thread. He was one of the most severely wounded airmen in the history of any U.S. war. And I was called at his time of injury as a first responder. We had just arrived at Balad Air Base. We had just taken over the encampment from the Army. It was Camp Anaconda, and we were reverting it to Balad Air Base. And this gentleman was conscious the whole time. He was covered in soot and ash, so you didn't know he was a Caucasian. The heat of the wound singed and cauterized his wounds shut, so he was at that point not bleeding out. And we transferred him to the hospital in the golden 5 minutes, where he began getting IV fluids, which then opened those cauterized areas. He began to bleed out. He required 20 units of blood. He bankrupted the blood bank, and we had to put an alarm system out for volunteers to quickly make their way to the hospital on base to give blood. As quickly as we could get it out of that person, it was pumped into Brian. So he stabilized in Balad Airfield. Over the course of 24 hours, was air flighted to Lonsdale Air Base. Within 36 hours, he arrived at Andrews Air Force Base. His wounds were basically amputees. They were amputated. He was fit for prosthetics when he was ready. But his attitude never changed. Any person in front of him was one to be met with gratitude and a smile. It wasn't about him, and never was. And I followed him along his path, but in the background, just call, see how he's doing, keep up with him. He married his fiancée in the hospital bed of Andrews Base while he was there. He bet the physical therapist, if he wasn't walking within 3 months, that the physical therapist would have to lose 100 pounds. And the physical therapist had to lose 100 pounds. This gentleman had every reason to go into the deep, dark space. He had every reason to unplug from society and integration into humanity and become an isolated being. Oh, the things he'd seen. Oh, the things that had happened to him. Oh, woe is me. But he didn't. And because he didn't, I had no excuse not to. I had no excuse to be operatively dysfunctional, because look at what he was going through, and maintaining that attitude, he set the bar high for me. So I didn't go into PTSD because I followed along his journey and he set the bar. Staying outwardly enrolled in life. Staying outwardly compassionate with your fellow beings. How can I help? It's not about me. How can I help you? Operating on those intellects of the whole intellect creates a self-transcendent space where you so beautifully disappearing. And this is why Airman Colfage was my vaccination against PTSD, because he showed the way. He showed the way. So this is Brian Colfage, who's now a motivational speaker. That's his wife. They have a child now, and there's him rehabbing in the lower right-hand side corner there of that slide. And this is at Veterans Day Parade in 2014. So he's doing very well. He's now an architect, and he still surfs and runs and does everything that he's always wanted to do. So this is your homework number 3. Be a part of a team or a community, making a difference from wherever you are. So you can think of this, that our best self is shareable. There's actually a field of science for that called fractality. We won't get into that. But just take my word for it. With heart rate variability, the microbiomes, quantum entanglement, social epigenetics, all of this is pointing to be a team. Crowdsource for your own health. So this is crowdsourcing in action. Pararescue Indoctrination Program, Lackland Air Force Base. Here's the team at work, staying close-knit, probably coming back from a run. I'm already coming back from a run. Okay. This is more of the same, of them getting some highlights, probably some guidance, next course of action. Okay, so exercise is always fun in groups. So there's more. You'll notice something similar to all these pictures in that what they're doing is all together, and not one person is standing out. So this idea is pushing ahead again and getting out of your silo mentality. Get out of your silo. There they are, graduating after an 8-week course of indoctrination with a 70% attrition rate. So by themselves, none of them would have been able to do this. They go through extremely hard training, 7-mile runs, 2 to 4 hour swims a day, with drown proofing, so that they don't get scared when they're literally drowning, so that they can rescue you as a rescue swimmer when you need it without them having any fear themselves. The discipline that it takes to do this by one individual, it would never happen. You'll see them in one of these slides carrying a log that's so large that not one of them could ever have lifted it. It took the whole team. And the whole team pulls each other through. With a 70% attrition rate, they graduate very few. These were my patients in Lackland Air Force Base. The blue collars mean that they were graduates, or very soon to become graduates. And they were tough as nails. This is them in the San Antonio River. I don't know if you've ever been on the Riverwalk. Anyone ever been on the Riverwalk at San Antonio? Okay. When I first visited, someone said, "Gosh, why would they have a river so close to a sidewalk without a rail?" And they said, "Well, the first drunk guy that ever fell in, we just said, just stand up, because it's just 3 feet deep. It's not going to hurt you there. It just looks like a deep river." So that's them in their snorkel and their gear. So this flight surgeons go on to do great things. This is a teammate of mine that I wish I knew. He's a mentor from afar. This is Toby Cosgrove. Does anybody recognize that name? No? Okay, so he's CEO of a Cleveland clinic. But he was a flight surgeon, a former commander of the Contingency Airvac Staging Facility, which is like an inpatient airport terminal. That's where, when we get all the wounded from all over Balad or Baghdad, we stabilize them and we get them ready for their flight out. So it's like an inpatient airport terminal. This gentleman runs an $8 billion healthcare system, 9 regional hospitals, 21 family health clinics, and He's a top 5 hospital and has been for years and years. He's only one of 2 hospitals named among America's 99 most ethical companies by the Ethisphere Institute. So your team doesn't have to be a team that you see every day. It can be someone you aspire to be on your team. Just make a vision board, and the people that you admire the most, make those your team, because one day I bet it would happen. So take care of your people. This is inter-military relationship building in Sweden. And in South Africa, we were doing a tour. This is General Hobbins, who's now retired. He's a patient of mine, and he is the reason I'm standing up here today, because he said, believe in the medicine that you do. He said, don't ever change. Because it can be intuitive, and it can be about relationships. This is, if you take care of them, they'll take care of you. So take care of your patients, they'll take care of you. Take care of your team, and they take care of you. Don't expect it, but it'll happen, believe it, because it's physics. It's a return of energy. This is a picture of General Hobbins after he's retired, after his retirement ceremony, sitting on a table, and him asking about my fiance. And he had said he'd never met him before. And so I said, well, I'm glad to get him on the phone if you'd like to talk with him. He said, I'd love to talk with him. I want to see if this is a good guy or not. So this is him calling up Elmer. Elmer likes to be not called out, so I won't do that, but he is here. And he says, what does he do? I said, he's a pararescueman. He said, uh-oh, they can be trouble. Let me talk to him. So he got on the phone with him, and they had a conversation. And there's me getting a picture of them having a great talk together. So Elmer was general approved. This is our airframe F-16. This one is out of Hill Air Force Base. But so I never won Flight Surgeon of the Year, which is an academic reality. If you're a flight surgeon, it's very political, but it's one of those kind of big certificates. It goes on your Love Me wall. You know what a Love Me wall is, where you have all the certificates. They're all framed, and it takes up a whole wall. It's called a Love Me wall. So I never got that, but I won the respect and the trust of my patients. This is an oar from the pararescue team. The reason I put this up here is not to call attention to the award, but to call attention to the detail and the care that they were reflecting back. Do you see this cord that's wrapped around that oar? Usually these are given to new graduates of the pararescue team. This is the first one made for a flight surgeon and a girl flight surgeon. So they took the maroon 550 parachute cord and they Cloroxed it so it would be pink. And it says, just so you guys know, in the Navy it's hoorah, and the Air Force is hoo-yah. We got to clear that up now. Hoo-yah is Air Force, hoorah is Navy, just so you know. It says, Captain Amy Coleman, thank you for your hard work, dedication, and devotion to the pararescue indoctrination course and our mission. You will be missed. Hoo-yah. So that actually means more to me than a certificate from the United States Air Force. I don't know about you. It's kind of like a homemade gift, right? All right. So also on my way out of this rotation at Lackland, the procedure for a pilot when he's retiring is to go on a FINI flight. FINI means final. And this is preserved as a pilot tradition. So when this happens, you get to choose how you're going to use the jet fuel for the day. You get in front of your briefing board and you say, I want to do this with the jet, I want to do this and this and this. And for your taxpayer benefit, I will tell you that every drop of jet fuel is usually used for wonderful training missions, and everything is mapped out according to how it's going to be the best benefit to the student and the Air Force. Not on this day. This day, the jet fuel was used to do a low flying through the hill country of Texas, because that's what I wanted to see, and to go to the top of the atmospheric plane of the envelope that the F-16 could fly, which is that right-handed space, where you almost see the curvature there of the atmospheric stratification, and then to come down doing turns at 9 Gs all the way home. So that was my Finney flight, and you couldn't wipe the smile off my face. And at the end, they soak you with champagne because because it's a big party that, you know, it's your final flight. So that's why my flight suit looks like it's dark green, in accordance to the others, which are light green, and it smells like booze. So that's how I went into my out-processing of military into the administrative quarters of headquarters, was smelling like booze, dripping with champagne, and a big smile on my face. My call sign was Peaches because I'm kind of a sweet Southern girl. I always wanted the tough call sign, but you know what? It was sweet. So keep them flying is the idea of flight surgery, but it also applies to you, because keep them flying refers to your thoughts, refers to your integration with your network and your friends and your team. It integrates to your awareness of how things are interrelated and how that affects your health. So the idea that you play an integral part by the quality of your empathy, with full focus, courage, and full use of your intellect, with courage in discomfort zones, with your full throttle intelligence, with your team-minded unity consciousness, you'll see that it hasn't been at all along this whole path how you can make a difference. It wasn't about doing. It was about being. And in that, the difference was made in you. And the world you finally see will be what you were looking for the whole time. Never forget to look behind you, check your 6 for situational awareness. Now you have the tools to make a difference. Look at this guy. That's a lawn. I don't care who you are or where you are. That's a lawn in the middle of the Sunni Triangle Desert. And he loves it. And he's making a difference there. Last but not least, has anyone ever seen this picture? No one? This is a very famous picture, but no one here's seen it. That's fine, because it was the first time I had seen it when someone showed me, but I'm passing it to you now. This is one of England's finest portrait painters. His name is Sir Luke Fildes. There's a story behind this painting. Even though Sir Luke Fildes captured perfectly what this physician was doing, he had full focus on his patient and true empathy and awareness. He was in a team with the family around him. This was in the pre-antibiotic age when this painting was delivered. And it was actually a true story painting. It was a painting that actually happened. The story is this, that Dr. Murray is represented here taking care of the artist's son. So that's Sir Luke Fildes' son in bed. Dr. Murray stayed that whole holy night, Christmas Eve, to attend to that son. And they lost him before antibiotics. You see in the window there, the beginning of the dawn that's coming over the top of the horizon. You can see it through the window. And Fildes was commissioned to paint this scene, and it took him 4 years to be ready to actually paint it. So he did. He was supposed to do just a medical painting. And he decided to do the portrait of his dying son. But it wasn't about his dying son. It was about Dr. Murray. Because Dr. Murray had spent everything. All his arrows, all of his weaponry, all of his tools in his toolkit, and nothing had helped. And there was nothing else to do. But you know what? We don't see a failure here. We don't see a failure. We see a physician who rose to the highest tradition of our profession. Our patients know that we're not gods, nor do they expect us to be. Just do the best you can, and that's what they remember. So, this picture allows us to retain hope, because that's what Dr. Murray did. Be present, and just do the best you can.
Thank you so much, Amy. Because I never served in the military and have been a civilian all my life, I'm always awed and humbled on Veterans Day by those who have served. So thank you for your service to our country. But I think after today, we all know that we can make a difference, all of us, from wherever we are. So to you, we say a collective hoo-yah. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Dean Pepin, Dean Lang, and Bill Paul. Thanks.